One of my friends snitched my stupid mistake to my husband. I lost the only person I cared about. I got to know about Reddit through some friends of mine who told me that this was a safe space to share your personal stories without any judgment. So here I am today to share something life-shattering that had happened to me recently. I have nobody to blame but myself for all the events that I would be mentioning below. Let me take a deep breath and tell you my story. My name is Samantha and I'm 47 years old. I have been married to David, who is 54 for the past 25 years. David had always been a loving and caring husband as long as I can remember. We had 3 kids who left home when they grew up, and now it's just the 2 of us living in our big old house. I had taken a break from my work to spend my time at home as my job was getting too toxic. David was into sales and made enough money for the both of us. He also had a business setup to come in handy when he retired. Our kids arranged a grand event for our 25th marriage anniversary. It was at one of our holiday homes where everybody near and dear had been invited. I could see a lot of familiar faces that had been in my life for as long as I could remember. As I was walking down greeting people, I heard someone comment that I was trying to be too young wearing that dress which did not suit someone of my age. I tried to see who it was, but it was too loud and crowded to make out who could have made such malicious comments. I decided to forget about it for now and enjoy the party. As the party progressed, I could not help but keep going back to those comments in my head. I suppressed my unease and focused on enjoying my time with my family. It was very rare for us to get together as all my kids stayed in different cities. It was 1 week since our wedding anniversary. I could still not shake those comments off my head. I was down in my spirits and not my usual self. David could sense that there was something wrong with me and asked if there was something he could do to make me feel better. I shared my concerns with David, who was furious about it. David, being the loving husband that he was, tried his best to cheer me up. He took me shopping so that I could divert my attention and stop thinking about any negative emotions that were ruining my happiness. He reminded me that I had always been a timeless beauty and nobody could take that away from me. He took me to a spa that could help me release the tension and calm my mind. I smiled at the effort that he put in, and I knew that I was lucky to have him as my husband. Even after a few weeks, I couldn't let go of those comments that kept haunting me. I shared my concerns with David and asked him to be very honest and tell me if I looked bad. David looked at me and said that I looked perfect, and I should not let these comments hit my confidence. I told him that it was difficult for me to move on from these comments and that I should do something about it. David told me that he was always there for me, and if there was something he could do, that I was always welcome to go up to him and talk to him about it. I started to Google about fitness and body shape and diet. I tried a diet for a few days, but I understood that it was not my cup of tea. I needed guidance and help to start my fitness journey. I told David that I would not be able to do this on my own, and I would need an expert. David said that he had something in mind, but wasn't sure if I would be up for that idea. He suggested that I check out a few gyms with personal trainers that not only focused on exercise, but also on diet, and would guide me to improve my health. He said that he knew my aversion towards going to the gym, but I could try it for a few weeks and see if it helps. At this point, I was willing to do anything to get out of this depressed state that I was in. I started scouting a few gyms and shortlisted a few places to visit and talk to the trainers. I knew exactly what I had in mind and what I was expecting my trainer to guide me with. After going over a few gyms, I finally shortlisted a gym. I came home all excited and broke the news to David that I finally found a trainer that I felt could help me in my journey. David was very excited to see my determination and motivation to hit the gym. The next day I went to the gym and met my personal trainer. His name was Tony. He was tall, handsome, young, and obviously ripped. I could see that he had a lot of admirers in the entire gym. The girls would drool over his body and the boys tried hard to have a boy like him. He was quite popular and was aware of it. He told me that he would start off with light exercises and basics to begin with, and as we progressed we could move to something on an intermediate level. I was happy that he had a plan in mind. As I was leaving, he handed me a diet chart that I had to follow to make myself fitter and healthier. I was very happy with my first gym session and was excited to tell David all about it. I went home and stuck the diet chart to my fridge to make sure that I followed it religiously. When David came home, I was all excited and started blabbering about my experience at the gym without taking a breath. He smiled and said that he was happy to see me happy. It has been a week since I started going to the gym. David told me that he could see positive changes in my body. I was very happy to receive compliments from David, and I myself felt very good in my own skin. I was feeling confident and had this unknown drive that I could look good in anything that I wear. My gym sessions had now moved from 45 minutes to a full 1 hour. I was able to do a lot of things that were difficult in the beginning. My bond with Tony grew stronger as days passed. One day, Tony was teaching me a new exercise. That's when one of his fingers brushed my thighs. It sent shivers down my spine, and I felt an electrifying feeling that I could not shake off. He looked at me and smiled sheepishly at his innocent mistake. We both laughed about it and let it go. I did not make it into a big issue and decided not to tell David about this. I knew David wouldn't mind this, but somewhere it didn't feel right to tell David. The next day, I entered the gym as usual and saw Tony waiting for me. He told me that we would be doing a new exercise today and took me to a different area of the gym. As he was showing me the correct posture for the exercise, I could feel his hand on my buttock. I did not know if it was intentional or he was just trying to correct my posture. I was enjoying myself. I am not going to lie and wanted it to rest there for some time. I asked Tony if this was the right posture, to which he said that he would have to hold me to make sure I don't sprain myself. He was the expert here and would be the one deciding. I agreed to it and stood straight. He stood behind me a little too close for my comfort. I could feel his breath on my neck. He held my hand and made me hold the bar in front of me. He asked me to take a step and bend my thigh. I did that, but he said that my thigh was not aligned. He took his hand and held my thigh to align it correctly. His touch was doing something to me. As he was still holding my thigh, he placed his other hand on my buttock. I stopped breathing for a second. I could not understand if he was still on the same page, focusing on the exercise. I tried to look at Tony's face to see what was going on in his head, but when I turned, I realized that his face was inches away from mine. I could feel his breath on my lips, and I forgot what I wanted to do. He gave me a smirk and I pecked my lips. He then quickly stood straight and said that he was sorry. He said he shouldn't have done this, but he got carried away. He looked around and made sure that nobody saw what happened and left. I stood there all alone trying to process what just happened. That was something I wasn't expecting, but surprisingly, it didn't make me angry. I knew that the normal reaction to this would have been me fuming with anger and complaining about Tony, but I didn't. It has been 4 days now since our little peck. I decided against telling David about all this happening at the gym. I wanted to figure this out on my own. It had been 4 awkward days with Tony at the gym. I decided that both Tony and I had to sit together and address this. We can't go on feeling awkward around each other as we had to work together. I asked Tony if we could have a little talk at a nearby cafe after my session. He agreed to it and said he would meet me there 30 minutes after I left, during his break. I waited for him at the cafe, and when he arrived, he had a guilty look on his face. I got straight to the point and told him that he doesn't need to feel awkward or guilty around me. I mean, he was young, so it was natural for him to get carried away. It was not his fault, and that he could stop avoiding my gaze. I told him to forget about it, and let's just get back to being the way we were. He said that he was thankful to me for not complaining about him and being understanding. I told him it was all good, and we should just bury this in the past. After I sorted things with Tony, I felt pretty good about it and thought that things will get normal going forward. We had a normal week after my conversation with Tony. Things got a little out of hand at times when Tony's hands would be at places where they were not supposed to be. I tried to act as oblivious as possible to Tony's advances towards me. I assured myself that it was just a crush which would soon be over. I decided against telling David about this so that he had one less thing to worry about. I had confidence that I could deal with it myself. One evening, as David and I were having dinner, David told me that he was a little concerned about my gym sessions. My heart sank, and I thought that probably David had come to know about Tony. He told me that I was taking a long time in my workout sessions, which was not required for my age. He asked me not to stress myself out and do only the amount of workout I was comfortable with. He also told me that the gym I go to was pretty far from our house. I could probably switch to a gym which was much closer to where we lived to avoid long travel times. I instantly became defensive and answered that I loved my gym and would not want to change it. I was happy with the progress I was making and did not want to hamper it by changing the gym. David was taken aback by my defensiveness and said that he was just suggesting so that I can save some time, but he did mention that he understands my point completely and would let me make a decision on my own. I was feeling bad about lashing out at David for no reason. It has been 3 months since I started my gym sessions. I could see a lot of change in my mind and body. At the same time, I could not ignore the chemistry between me and Tony. Things had been escalating pretty quickly between me and Tony. There was undeniable chemistry between us. We would sneak kisses in between our workout sessions, and if we were lucky, we could even find an empty bathroom to make out. I felt so guilty for cheating on David that I barely spoke to him and tried to avoid spending time with him because I was scared that I might blurt something out which would destroy my marriage. David told me that my gym was keeping me too busy even to spend some time with him. I gave him a reassuring smile and said that I would try to make myself more available for him. I knew that I had to be very careful and not be caught by David. I need to make sure that he is happy so that I can continue my fairy tale romance with Tony. I did not feel any butterflies or sparks when David touched me or came close to me. I don't know if it was because I was too familiar with his touch or that I was enjoying Tony's touch way too much. As it was winter, David suggested that I start working out at home. I gave him very vague excuses, telling that we do not have all the necessary equipment, and I would not be that motivated at home to work out. David told me that equipment was not an issue, and that he could arrange everything that I wanted in the spare room. I could convert that room into a gym. I still looked very dissatisfied by his suggestions, so he told me that, why don't I check with my trainer if he could give private sessions at home? That was enough to bring an instant smile to my face. I told him that I would check with him and get back to David on this. David was pleased that at least I would consider his request and make an effort to make it work. After 2 days, I told him that Tony had agreed to take private gym sessions at home. I could not make it too obvious that Tony would readily agree to it. It was my first day of working out from home. I introduced David and Tony. I noticed David a little taken aback by the way Tony looked. After Tony left that day, he asked me what I thought about Tony. I was caught off guard and gave him a vague answer that he's a good guy and a nice trainer. I could feel the guilt rising higher that I might get caught. David told me that he has an upcoming deal for the client that was very important. He would be away most mornings working at this office. He said that he's relieved that Tony would be keeping me company, at least for a few hours, when he was away. The next day, Tony arrived as usual at 10 a.m. for our workout session. He noticed that David wasn't around and gave me a wicked smile. I knew what was going on in this head. As we started warming up, I noticed that Tony kept staring at me with a constant smile plastered on his face. I tried to ignore that and focused on my warm-up. As soon as I bent down, Tony came and stood behind me. He had both his hands on my buttocks and told me that I had the wrong posture. He also told me that he liked that I had a sexy figure. I could not help but blush at what he said. He knew that I was trying so hard to stop myself. He walked towards me and winked. We started kissing each other passionately and making out. Tony was fast enough to grab me and start undressing me when we both fell beside each other and started laughing. As I was catching my breath, I saw Tony sit on my body and start kissing me passionately. I could see that my body had a different mind of its own and started acting on its own accord and reciprocated the kiss. Tony's hands moved very swiftly and started taking off my pants. I got goosebumps and butterflies in my stomach. Just like that, we started making out on the hard floor. After about 20 minutes, we stopped because we were both tired and panting. I could see a sense of satisfaction on Tony's face, as if he knew that I had been resisting him for quite some time. There were still 30 minutes left for our gym session. Tony asked me naughtily if I wanted to go for another round. I could not help but laugh at his request. But deep down, I knew that David might be back from office anytime soon, and it was better to stop for today. I told Tony that I loved him and that we could continue where we started tomorrow. He agreed to it, smiled at me, and left. David came home in the afternoon after he finished his work. I had been thinking about everything that had happened today with Tony. I could not deny the fact that I enjoyed those moments with Tony. As I looked at David, there was an undeniable amount of guilt that I was feeling in my gut. He kept telling me about his work, but my mind was racing and I could not focus on anything that he was saying. He saw me spaced out and said that he did not want to bore me with his boring talks. I smiled at him but could not meet his eyes. He asked me how my workout was and I jumped. I quickly answered that everything was normal just like every other day. But deep down, I knew I was lying to him. The truth was my workouts had become a way for me to escape and spend more time with Tony, and the guilt of betraying David was eating away at me. The problem I had with David was not that I never loved him. I did, but the sex was meh. I never actually enjoyed having sex with David. Tony, on the other hand, was young, energetic, and to top it all, he also had a sexy body. I knew what I was doing right now was wrong on so many levels, but I felt that I deserved a good sex life. I know that I was being too selfish, but you gotta be selfish at times. I couldn't deny the fact that Tony fulfilled my desires in ways David never could. Despite the guilt, I couldn't ignore the exhilarating feeling of being desired and satisfied in ways I had always longed for. I decided to give my marriage one last chance tonight before I make my final decision. Maybe it was more to satisfy my guilt than it had to do with David or saving the marriage, now that I look back. At night, I wore the sexiest lingerie that I owned and made a romantic environment in our bedroom. I lit a few scented candles and placed them across her room. I got the bubble bath ready in our bathtub and played romantic music. I had asked David to get some chocolate so that I could prepare all this in the meantime. When David got home and came into our bedroom, he saw that the lights were off and the room was lit only by candles. I could see that expression on his face that melted my heart. It was so pure and full of love for me. He walked inside and took off the quilt to uncover me under it in my most sexy lingerie. He was amused by this surprise. We started kissing each other. I undressed him, and we made love to each other. After the lovemaking, David was tired and dozed off. I was lying there in bed, unable to sleep. Subconsciously, I was comparing what I felt with Tony and what I felt with David. There was an immense difference between how they both made me feel. With David, it all happened too quickly, and before I could even start enjoying it, it was over. But with Tony, it felt out of the world. He knew exactly what to do to pleasure me. After a lot of tossing and turning, I finally went to bed, still feeling unsatisfied and longing for the intense connection I had with Tony. The lingering thoughts of our passionate encounters kept me awake, leaving me yearning for more fulfillment in my current relationship with David. The next day, David told me that he would be spending most of his time at home and would only go out if necessary. I gave him the best smile I could to make him know that I was happy to have him at home and spend more time with him. There was no way I could let him know what was going on behind his back between me and Tony. When Tony came, he wasn't expecting David to be at home. I could see the unease in Tony's body language. I was warming up when I saw David walk up to Tony and talk to him. David was asking Tony about my progress. I was all tensed up about what they were talking about. Tony came back after 5 minutes and gave me a reassuring nod to calm down. I breathed a sigh of relief that David was still unaware of my affair with Tony. Tony and I enjoyed working out from home as we had no need to worry about someone walking in between or waiting for the bathrooms to be vacant to make out. Whenever David was out, we had lots of chances and lots of rooms to make out in. We could choose any room that we wished and make out till our heart's content. After a few days, David had to leave for an important meeting with the client very early in the morning. David left at 6 in the morning to make sure that he made it on time. As he left, he kissed me goodbye and said that he would be back by around 2 p.m. because the client that he was dealing with was very fussy and would take time to sign the contract. I wished him good luck and told him to call me once he was done so that we could go out in the evening to celebrate if he got the deal. He agreed to it and left. I knew that I wanted him to call me so that I knew exactly when he would be coming. I decided to call Tony and let him know about this. I made my preparations for my time with Tony and waited for him. The doorbell rang and I knew that it was Tony. I rushed and opened the door wearing something I knew he would like on me. His gaze was giving me butterflies in my stomach. I turned around to look at him and acted as if he was not affecting me at all. We were standing so close to each other that there was hardly any space between our bodies. Tony then placed one of his hands on my stomach and with the other. He turned my face towards his and started kissing me. He was such a good kisser that I could not resist myself and gave in. We continued kissing each other and slowly started undressing each other. Our hands were touching each other everywhere. Tony made me sit on one of the equipment and we started making love to each other right in the middle of the gym. Tony was very good and also fast at what he was doing. I was having the best sex of my life and completely forgot about David and my marriage. I could see a stark difference between last night's sex with David, which was not as great as just the foreplay with Tony. After a while, we both were tired and panting and decided to take a break. We were still on one of the equipment and laughed looking at each other because we both knew we had been craving for each other's body. It was not even noon and I knew that David wouldn't be back till 2 p.m. We still had 4 hours that we could utilize. I wanted to play hard to get, so I told Tony to put on his clothes. I took my clothes and started wearing them. I then walked towards the dining table and put some juice in 2 glasses for the both of us. I asked him to have some juice and I'll be right back. I went to my room and quickly started scanning through my lingerie to put on something sexy. I ran into the bathroom and started filling the bathtub with water and threw in a bath bomb. I took out the wine in 2 glasses and placed them beside the bathtub. I made sure everything was ready. I wore the lingerie and covered myself with a gown. I walked downstairs and saw Tony sitting at the table drinking the juice. I sat across from him and drank my juice. I spilled some juice on myself and made it look like an accident. I asked Tony if he could help me get it off my clothes. He started walking towards me knowing what this meant. He walked behind me to the bedroom. I made him follow me to the bathroom and slowly took off my gown. He could see that the bathtub was ready. There were wine glasses next to it. He came towards me and whispered in my ear that he loved the entire setup. I could not help but blush at his compliment. He started touching me at places that felt right. I loved how his touch made me feel. He started pressing my body towards his and slowly turned me around. We started kissing each other and walked towards the bathtub. He very swiftly pulled off my lingerie and pushed me into the bathtub. He followed me and we started making out, covering each other in foam. We took a break to enjoy the wine. Tony told me that he knew the moment I walked into the gym that we would be having a steamy session very soon. He said that he already sensed that I have been starving for sex for a very long time, which was not completely false. My sex life with David had been non-existent for such a long time that I could not remember when was the last time we had passionate sex. Tony was someone who brought my sensual and wild sex drive alive. After having sex with Tony, I could remember how enjoyable sex actually was. After some more making out in the bathtub, we decided to take a shower together. We had some more sex in the shower. After the shower, I gave Tony one of David's shorts and asked him to wait for me on the bed. It was still 12 p.m. and there were 2 hours more for David to come home. I got greedy and thought that we could do one more round before I let Tony go for today. When David would be back at home, I knew that it would be difficult for me to be alone with Tony again like this for an undetermined amount of time. So today was the only day where we could capitalize and make the most of it. I put on another pair of my lingerie, which barely covered anything, and walked towards the bed where Tony was lying down. He looked at me in awe and could not stop smiling. I liked that even at my age, I had it in me to attract such a young and hot guy. I came onto the bed, pushed him, and started kissing him. Within minutes, we were naked and were making out again. We were so into each other that it took us a while to realize that something fell, which made a huge noise. I turned my head to see where the noise came from and saw David standing at the entrance of our bedroom with flowers in his hands and a bottle of champagne which was now shattered on the floor. I froze for I don't know how long, as I could not understand how David could be here at this time. I did not even realize the state I was in. Tony tried to push me away, and that's when I came back to reality. I quickly got off Tony and started frantically searching for my clothes. Tony quickly grabbed the shorts and was about to wear them when David said that it was his shorts. Tony threw the shorts on the floor and tried to cover himself with his hands. I found the lingerie I was wearing but decided to cover myself with the quilt, as that would be more decent. Tony covered himself with his hands and started running outside. He probably grabbed his clothes and left. David was staring at me in disbelief, unable to even speak. I started blabbering that I was sorry and it was a mistake and that it would never happen again. He just had to trust me. It was Tony who manipulated me to have sex with him. I told David that I loved him and our marriage and kids was what mattered to me the most in this world. David did not utter even a single word from his mouth, but I could see in his eyes that he was disgusted by what I had done. He went to his office and locked himself. I dressed myself and went to check if Tony had left. After making sure that there was no sign of Tony, I went to the office room and started knocking. I asked David if he could please open the door and let me explain. There was no response from David whatsoever. I started thinking about how to approach the situation so as to cause as little damage to my marriage as possible. Should I tell him that this was the first time this happened and it was all a mistake? As I was thinking, I realized that the bathroom is still a mess with everything that we did before David arrived. I thought of salvaging the situation by cleaning the bathroom before David could witness something much crueler. I ran to the bathroom and started draining the bathtub. I started cleaning the shower when I remembered the wine bottle and the wine glasses. Just as I was about to pick them up, I saw David enter the bedroom and look at the condition of the bathroom. He instantly understood what would have gone down in the bathroom. I know that after all this, there was no saving myself from David. I looked at David and panicked. He had blood in his eyes. This was the first time I saw David so angry that I was shivering with fear. He just kept staring at me without uttering a single word. It made me nervous and I started blurting out that it was Tony who forced me to have sex with him. David screamed that what he saw did not look forceful. He told me that it looked like I was enjoying myself. I too lost my cool and yelled at him. I told him that yes, I was enjoying myself. Tony was able to satisfy me in a way that he was unable to. It was not my fault that I had been deprived of sex all these years that I had been with him. I could see the anger and hurt in David's eyes as my words sank in. He was taken aback by my confession and the harsh truth that I had just revealed. As the argument escalated, emotions ran high and tensions flared. I realized that our relationship had reached a breaking point, with underlying issues of intimacy and satisfaction coming to the surface. I started blaming him for everything that had been missing in my life. He told me that he did everything that he could to make me happy. He even was working at this age to make sure that we had a luxurious life. But deep down, I knew that it wasn't just about material possessions or external factors. It was about the emotional connection that had slowly eroded over time. Our communication had become strained, and we had stopped truly understanding each other's needs and desires. The absence of intimacy and satisfaction had led to all the trouble, and that was something that David had a hard time understating. I did not need his money. All I needed was him to satisfy me. I knew that all this talk hurt his ego, and it was getting very difficult for him to accept that he was not that great in bed. David started slamming everything in our bedroom. He was scaring me, so I stopped yelling at him. I thought that I had done enough to put my point across. He left the room after breaking everything he possibly could. It has been 2 days since David caught me cheating on him with Tony. He hasn't spoken to me ever since our argument, and I have no idea how to get him to talk to me. I tried to reach Tony, but he isn't picking up my calls either. Tony had been missing even from the gym, so I knew that I could not go to him. I don't know if after all this I would be able to save my relationship with David. I am now coming to my senses. I don't know what I should do and how I should behave in such a situation. David was my only hope to survive right now. If we get divorced, I would have to face public shame, and also my kids whom I love dearly would never even want to look at my face. I am lost, and the only thing I can do right now is plead to David to give me another chance to salvage the marriage, and not to mention the affair to the kids. If anyone has ever been in the same situation, please give me some ideas on how I can get myself out of this mess. Thank you for reading and not judging me.
This is going to be a crazy story once you read it, and it's one that's full of betrayals. I don't know where to start, but I'll try and put together everything for you guys to understand. The mistake I made was from when I agreed to go out with the girls, and everything ruined my relationship. I don't think that was what ruined it, but it was my friend that did. Hey Redditors, my name is Catherine and I'm 21. My boyfriend is 22 years old, just 1 year older, and his name is Max. I'm an average college student with average grades, and I take my studies pretty seriously. I'm sort of an introvert and I don't like being around people. You can say I'm a shy person because I don't talk to anyone unless they start the conversation first. I grew up in a family of 4 and my parents were really strict. It wasn't like my mom and dad loved each other because they fought lots of time. My brother usually stopped them and they apologized to him, but I just watched the whole drama. The frustrating thing was that they weren't strict to my brother, and it was just me. I remember the first time I lashed out at them and asked them about why they were so strict to me, and they told me these exact words: "Because you're a girl, and we care about you." Those words upset me to hear, and I didn't know why I had to have a tough life just because I was a girl. I wasn't allowed to go anywhere or meet up with friends, and I felt so trapped with that. My brother, on the other hand, was a free person and could do anything he wanted. I think he was spoiled, but they didn't bother about it. By the time I was 20, I was ready for college, and I was glad that I could finally leave the house. I thought they would have told me to pick the college I wanted to go to, but I raised my expectations too high. They chose the college that was closest to home, so I would be able to come home immediately anytime they give us holidays. But it wasn't that close either. I was still happy I was leaving the house and having time to do anything I wanted. I moved into the girls' dorms and I had one roommate. Her name is Claire, and I felt like she was the complete opposite of me. I didn't talk to her much, but she usually tried starting conversations with me. 3 months passed and I was beginning to open up with Catherine. I observed her during the 3 months that had passed, and I confirmed about her being the opposite of me. Her personality was way different because she was wild, outgoing, and just completely weird, but I liked her that way. I also met another friend at one of the classes I attended, and her name was June. She was just like Claire, and I didn't know how both of them could keep up with my shyness and the way I didn't talk, but they did. June and Claire also vibed immediately when they met each other because they were so alike. 6 months had passed and I was still that introverted type of person because I wasn't used to going out or doing anything much. This was when I met my boyfriend, Max. Did I mention I took study really seriously? Well, yeah, I did. That day I went to the library to get some materials for work and I bumped into someone. I know it sounds like one fairy tale, but it's actually true. It was more like he bumped into me when he was rushing out of the library. He apologized and I said no worries. We met again in class and that was how we began talking. He asked a question and I answered it in class. He came to me after class and said he liked the way I answered the question and he liked smart people. He asked me if we could make study sessions and I agreed. That was how we started dating. He asked me out and I turned him down at first, but then I didn't want to be trapped anymore and wanted to do the opposite of what my parents always said, so I agreed. I didn't know how relationships worked, and I thought at 20 I had not even one boyfriend when people younger than me had already had 3 exes while I had not even one. So it was a great chance and I had my first boyfriend. The relationship was going well and he was a great person. He was even better in bed. Yes, I slept with him and I was happy he was my first. He was so gentle with me and understanding. My parents also said something similar to "don't do it before you marry," but I didn't want to obey everything they said. My relationship with him was going great and it was fun rebelling against my family. June and Claire met Max and we became a whole group, just 4 of us always moving together. I thought things were going to be going great till I finished college and stood up to my parents about how unfairly they treated me, but that plan was soon cut short. I also noticed that Claire was acting weird and asking for information about my boyfriend, but I took it as she was just curious. Max comes from an average family just like me, and he was very smart. He was both an introvert and extrovert, and he was pretty open about everything. He usually spoke his mind, and I liked that about him. I was different from him because I wasn't able to say my mind, but I was able to tell him about how my life had been, and he said he was going to be there. A year had passed since then, and I was still that introverted person who didn't like going out. Max had been asking us to go out on dates, but I told him I preferred meeting him privately than going out because I hated crowds. Because I turned down his offers so much, he stopped asking me on dates. The girls noticed and said they didn't like that about me. June came to sleep over at our dorm that evening around 7 p.m. and they were acting weird. They both faced me and told me we should have a girls' night out. I knew what they were up to, so I told them I was not interested, but they kept pushing and saying we should go. I asked if there was going to be alcohol because I didn't want to drink that, and I'd observed how people acted when they drank alcohol and got drunk. My dad comes back late from wherever he works, and he was always drunk, and it made them fight a lot. My mind was already getting distracted thinking about them, but I snapped back to reality. Claire said there was a frat party happening and the guy's parents were out of town, so that was why they were hosting it. This wasn't the first time they were asking me to follow them to a party. I was used to turning them down. I still contemplated going, but they kept pushing. saying the party was starting by 8 and it was already 7:53. So I felt like I should tell Max I would be going to a party and asking if he would join us. But the girls protested, mentioning that it was a girls' night out, so a guy shouldn't join them. I told them I would be attending as long as I wasn't going to eat or drink anything there because I hated crowds and heard so many parties about these kinds of parties. I finally agreed to go with them and just put on one of my casual clothes. They complained about my dressing, but I said they should deal with it. I wanted to wear what I was comfortable with, and they agreed since I didn't want to go in the first place. I don't know what I expected once we got to the party, but this wasn't it. The noise was the first thing that hit me, followed by the smell of alcohol. I looked at Claire and June, knowing they tricked me, and they just laughed. I was supposed to get upset, but I didn't mind because I knew they wanted me to get a new experience with parties. I was frustrated just a little, and the smell of the alcohol was bothering me. Could you believe we hadn't even entered the house yet, and all this was bothering me? So yes, it was worse when we entered inside. The alcohol smell hit me harder as I stepped in the house, and I felt nauseated. A guy came to greet all three of us, and June and Claire acted so familiar with him, but I felt like I didn't belong. I didn't pay that attention, but I was more focused on the environment I was in. There were people everywhere talking at the same time while there was this blasting music. I couldn't even hear myself speak when I tried to tell June and Claire that I couldn't stay and I wanted to leave. I guess it didn't matter because before I knew it, they were no longer at my side and went off to God knows where. I know I could have just left, but at the same time, I hated this. I was curious to see and observe how this party would go. I was tired of standing, so I looked around the house for any empty seat. I had finally found one, and I was lucky because a guy and a girl had just finished making out there, and they wanted to take it somewhere else. I sat down, and it clicked to me that half of everyone had booze in their hand while half of them were making out. I don't know if it was up to 5 minutes, but I was getting tired and I was bored. I looked around to see if I could find June or Claire anywhere. Claire popped down beside me, and it shocked me. She laughed and she said something, but I didn't hear what it was because of the music. She had 2 drinks in her hand and handed me one, but I just shook my head because I already told her I wasn't going to drink. She moved closer, and I think it was because she knew I couldn't hear her. She put her mouth to my ears, and I heard her say that it wasn't alcohol and it was just like an energy drink. I shouldn't have believed me, but I did. I took the drink from her hand and tasted it. It didn't taste like a normal drink, and it burnt my throat. I haven't taken any alcohol before, so I didn't know what it tasted like. I squeezed my face as I drank it, and I looked at Claire. She was grinning, and she shouted because of the music, asking me if I liked it. The truth was, I didn't hate because it wasn't bad. She said it was a new type of drink similar to punch that I didn't know about, and there was no alcohol, so I foolishly believed her. I finished the drink, and she kept bringing more, and I don't know why I kept on drinking it. I tried standing up after a few drinks, and I lost my sense of balance, which made me fall back down. I was wondering why it happened, and I stood up again, but the same thing happened. That made me realize I was drunk, even when I didn't know what it felt like beforehand. There was someone else that came to sit beside me, and I thought it was Claire, but I was disappointed to see it was not. It was one of the popular guys that Claire and June talked about a lot, and I never seemed to grasp his name. I never thought I needed it, so I didn't pay close attention. Eventually, I realized he said his name was Eric, and he asked me for my name. I didn't tell him because I didn't have any reason to. He placed his hands on my thighs, but I quickly pushed it away because it felt uncomfortable. Perhaps he knew I was drunk and wanted to make out just like the others, but I wasn't going to become one of them. He kept saying things, and I was already getting tired. I wanted to leave and rest my head on my bed because I felt dizzy. I was hoping Claire would come and bail me out, and it was like she read my mind. She came with a smile on her face, but I returned her a frown. She looked at the guy beside me and she grinned, but she knew I was paying him no attention, so she asked the guy if he could please leave so she'll talk to me because I was her friend. He left and she kept grinning, and I asked her what the heck that was all about her. She said she should be asking me because I didn't know how popular he was, but I didn't care about all that. Instead, I complained to her about how I felt about the whole loss of balance and dizziness. I confirmed my thoughts, knowing I was drunk and I was upset with her. She apologized immediately, saying she just wanted me to experience this because I was a shut-in. I won't deny the fact that I was a shut-in, but that didn't give her the right to lie about a drink and tell me to drink it because I trusted her. I felt betrayed. but what I felt wasn't the same as what I was going to feel later, and I had no idea. I was about to tell her about how I wanted to leave because I'd had enough, and that was when the music came to a stop. The host, I assume, who was the guy that came to greet us, shining his teeth to everyone, said we should come together for a game. I wanted to remove myself from the whole thing, but unluckily for me, they were hosting the game at the side where I was sitting, and I didn't want to get up because of how I was feeling. I felt the chair pressed down and I looked at my side. I scoffed silently because it was this same Eric guy that had sat down. Before I knew it, there were already so many people coming together. I counted at least 15 on them and they began to form a circle. The area was not so big but not so small either. Some of them sat down on each other's laps while some sat down anywhere they saw fit, mostly on the floor too. I looked around and noticed that there were still a lot of people who seemed uninterested. I spotted June making out with somebody at one corner and I looked away. I knew she was that kind of person because she told me before that she just wanted to be free and not be in any relationship. I spotted Claire sitting on someone's lap, but she was part of the circle. Our eyes locked and she did that same grin she did before. I should have known she was planning something, but my mind was too scattered at that moment. The guy beside me, Eric, kept trying to place his hands on my shoulder or thighs, but I just kept pushing it off. I think few people noticed because I heard tiny laughter towards our direction. The people who seemed uninterested were making it rowdy everywhere, so the guy hosting the party told them to move to another place and shooed them away. He focused on all of us and cleared his throat. I think he was a bit drunk. Well, he said the game we were going to be playing was Truth and Dare. I hadn't gone to parties, but I didn't know this was something they did in parties. I tried standing up to leave, but I wasn't even halfway up and I fell back down. When I sat down, I felt something hard in the place where I was sitting, and I looked down beside me. It was Eric's hand, and I adjusted and pulled it off, and he just chuckled. I knew I was stuck here, so I just continued. The guy hosting it, someone who I never found out his name, and I didn't care much about knowing, gave us drinks, but I just dropped it beside me because I was already drunk. He told everyone to pick a number, and I was the number 6. How the game started was that he asked number 2 Truth or Dare, and the girl chose Dare. He told her to flash everyone, and I thought that was absurd. The penalty of not choosing Truth or Dare was to drink, so I was at a disadvantage. She flashed everyone, and they all acted amazed and laughed. He called number 3 next, and he chose the Truth. The guy asked him if he would cheat on his girlfriend for any celebrity, and he said yes. But the girlfriend was right there, so she hit his head, and everyone laughed. He called 2 more numbers, and I thought he wouldn't call me, but it was my turn. He asked me the Truth or Dare, and I picked the Truth. He asked me what my body count was. I didn't know the meaning of that when I entered college, but I knew it later on. I answered honestly and said 1, but they all looked at me in doubt. When they saw I was joking, they laughed, and I felt embarrassed. Was it so bad to just sleep with one person? The guy called Eric number who was 7, and he picked Dare. He told him to pick anyone in the room and kiss the person. I knew I was in trouble then. Eric immediately looked at me and everyone went, ooh. I shook my head and told them I couldn't because I had a boyfriend, but they all booed me. They told me if I didn't want to kiss him, that I had to drink then. I didn't want to do any, but Claire came beside me and whispered in my ears to just do it. She said Max would never find out since this was a game that was all between us and everyone was matured. I shouldn't have listened to her, but I think I was too drunk so I couldn't think straight. I let out a huge sigh and faced Eric. Someone started chanting, "Kiss him." Then everyone began chanting that. I felt too pressured, so I decided to just give in. I closed my eyes and went in for the kiss with Eric. His lips were softer than what I had expected, not like I was expecting anything. As I was kissing him, I didn't want us to stop. I think it was the effect of the alcohol that did that. He placed his hands on my thighs and moved it up to my waist, pulling me closer, and that made me snap back to reality. I broke apart from the kiss and cleaned my mouth after, wondering what I had just done. I looked at Eric and he had a wide smirk on his face. I never noticed Claire videoing us and keeping her phone as fast as she could so I wouldn't see her. The game went on and I signaled at Claire that I wanted to leave. I was getting more uncomfortable and I noticed it was getting late. She didn't answer at first because she was so into the game, giving some guys lap dances and making out with others. I kept disturbing her till she gave in. We looked around for June in the other room, and she was giggling with someone. We told her it was time to leave, and she shrugged, but she agreed. They said bye to the people they knew, and we left. I didn't know the next morning was when everything was going to get ruined because of Claire. When I got back to the dorm, I threw up and felt bad. I couldn't stop thinking about the kiss because it didn't make me feel good. I was thinking of telling Max about it later, but I thought of what Claire said about it being between us. When I woke up the next morning, I threw up again and had a headache. Claire said it was expected, and I took some painkillers to make me feel better, and they worked. It was already noon, and it was on a weekend, so I was supposed to meet up with Max. I knew something was up when he called me and spoke so coldly to me that he wanted to see me. I told him okay, and I quickly cleaned up and met him at a cafeteria. I went in to hug him, and he blocked me, telling me to sit because he wanted to talk to me. He didn't say anything, but he just showed me a video on his phone. It was a video of me and Eric kissing the previous night. I watched it with shock in my eyes. I knew who was taking this video because of the angle I was in, and I even heard her voice. It was Claire, and I couldn't believe she backstabbed me. He collected his phone back from me, and I told him I could explain. He said he was listening, so I told him what had happened that night. It wasn't my fault because I was drunk, and it was peer pressure that made me kiss him. I asked him who sent the video, and he confirmed my suspicions, saying it was Claire. I tried apologizing to him, saying I kissed the guy because it was a game and I felt nothing, but he was no longer listening. He said he couldn't be with someone who would kiss strangers at random parties, and he broke up with me right there. I said I was sorry, but he didn't listen. I had to confront Claire, so I headed back to the dorm, but she wasn't around. I'm waiting for her right now. Update. Claire came back to the dorm with June in the evening, and the argument was a lot. June was confused since she had no idea about what happened, so I tried to summarize it to her. She asked Claire why she would do such a thing, and Claire admitted that she was jealous of me. That was surprising to hear. She said she envied our relationship and she doesn't regret ending it. I didn't know college was full of traitors, but I learned that. June told Claire she did a terrible thing by making a video and sending it to Max. But Claire kept saying she did nothing wrong because she didn't slam my lips to Eric. I felt hurt about that, but she was right. The holidays were coming up, and I needed to leave school grounds for a while, so I went back home. My parents were shocked to see me without informing them, but I just told them I missed home. It was a lie deep down. Claire called me to apologize, but I can't be friends with her, not after she had snitched on me. June is my only friend now, but I don't think I can trust anyone easily. I miss Max, and I shouldn't have kissed that guy just because I was pressured. I guess I learned not to trust people easily or give in to peer pressure.